Hello and welcome to the special edition of Vantage. We are coming to you live from the White House. The election is over. Counting is still underway. There are races that haven't been called yet, but they don't really matter anymore because we have a winner, Donald J. Trump. He will become the 47th President of the United States. Joe Biden has already invited him to the White House to discuss the transition of power. So what will Trump 2.0 look like? Who will be on his team? What are his plans for the first 100 days in office? What will his presidency mean for India and South Asia? And Trump isn't the only winner in this election. There's also Elon Musk. He bet on the right horse and it's paying off. We'll tell you who else is set to gain from this Trump presidency. Meanwhile, Kamala Harris has finally conceded. She spoke to her supporters yesterday and said that she will keep fighting. But is her dream run in politics over? Also, who are the Democrats blaming for this loss? Is it Harris or someone else? All this and more coming up on the show tonight. First up, the headlines. Major political crisis hits Europe's largest economy. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz fires his finance minister, triggering the collapse of Berlin's ruling three-party coalition. Scholz says he will seek a vote of confidence by mid-January that would pave the way for early elections by March. India calls out Canada's hypocrisy over freedom of speech, slams Ottawa's move to block an Australian news outlet. The action came just hours after it carried a press conference of India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar. Ties between New Delhi and Ottawa have been strained since Prime Minister Trudeau's baseless accusations of an Indian hand in the killing of Khalistani terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Israeli strikes hit the area near the Beirut airport, but operations at Lebanon's only international airport have not been hit. The strike came after Hezbollah targeted an Israeli military base close to the Ben Gurion airport. Since September, nearly 3,000 people have been killed in Israeli strikes on Lebanon. Clashes erupt in Mozambique. Police fire tear gas to disperse protesters in the capital. The main opposition leader had called for a protest against the election results. The ruling party won the October election. Since then, the Southern African nation, has been rocked by violence. Myanmar's embattled junta chief visits key ally China and holds discussions with Chinese Premier Li Qiang. It's his first trip to China since seizing power in Myanmar in a 2021 coup. The junta has been battling a major rebel offensive since last year. And the Australian Prime Minister promises to ban children under 16 from social media. The tech giants would be held responsible for enforcing this age limit and face hefty fines if young users slip through the cracks. The proposed new law is among the world's strictest measures aimed at children. There are two Americas today. If you walk around Washington, D.C., you can feel that. One group is thrilled about Trump's win. The other feels it's the end of America. And the middle ground? There doesn't seem to be any. In this divided climate, Kamala Harris broke her silence. She was slated to speak on Tuesday night, but as the results came in, she cancelled it. The campaign said it wanted some time, perhaps to make sense of the drubbing. Then yesterday, Harris returned to her campaign site, Howard University in D.C. She said the election is over, but the fight is not.
In our nation, we owe loyalty not to a president or a party, but to the Constitution of the United States. And loyalty to our conscience and to our God. My allegiance to all three is why I am here to say, while I concede this election, I do not concede the fight that fueled this campaign. This is not a time to throw up our hands. This is a time to roll up our sleeves. This is a time to organize, to mobilize, and to stay engaged for the sake of freedom and justice and the future that we all know we can build together.
To her credit, she didn't say stop the count. I know it sounds funny, but that's how low the bar is. Meanwhile, Trump had a busy day in Florida. He is at his home in Mar-a-Lago. Early on Wednesday, he delivered a victory speech, but after that, no one's seen him. Trump was busy responding to congratulatory messages. He also spoke to some world leaders like Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, Britain's Keir Starmer, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Ukraine's Zelensky, French President Macron, and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. All of them congratulated Trump. They also called for deepening ties under his leadership. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris also called Trump. Harris called him to concede the election, and Biden invited him to the White House. Harris apparently told Trump to be a president for all Americans. Trump responded by praising her strength and tenacity. I guess that's politics for you. Your mortal enemies on the campaign and reluctant friends afterwards. But Harris and Trump talking to each other will not solve America's divisions. Yes, Trump won easily, but the people are deeply divided. Listen to some of them.
I was very confident that Kamala and Mulls would win, but I guess our country is more uneducated than I thought, and I honestly gave the people the benefit of the doubt, which I guess I was wrong for.
I am at peace. I'm happy because now I see a future. I see that I can celebrate, and I see that something good is going to happen in the next 4 years. And if God wants, 8 more years with J.D. Vance.
I'm from New York. I've known this guy a long time. It's crushing to see him back in this situation. I honestly don't recognize my country.
All his life, he's been building and constructions and everything. He works with the people. And as an immigrant, I know a lot, but he says he hates Mexicans. He says he does this. No, he hates criminals. He doesn't like criminals.
Like I said, divided. Outside America, countries are bracing for Trump 2.0. They know what he stands for, but they also know that he is unpredictable.
아시아 태평양 또 글로벌 지역에서
We talked about having strong solidarity and partnership in the Asia-Pacific and global region based on the South Korea-US alliance. And Trump first talked about North Korea, not just talking about the North Korean nuclear program, as he may have an interest in North Korea.
Бажаю здоров'я, шановні українці.
The absolutely convincing result of the elections in America, the clear leadership of President Trump. I congratulate him on this victory.
I do not know Trump personally. I know Trump by listening to, watching, and reading his articles and by watching him on television. But I hope that the coexistence will be civilized, as I had with Bush, who was from the Republican Party, as I had with Obama, as I had with Biden.
Many things will certainly be different under a government led by Donald Trump. Donald Trump has always made that clear publicly. Our messages are clear. Firstly, Germany will remain a reliable transatlantic partner.
As expected, the last 24 hours have been interesting. Heartbreak for some, elation for others, and nervousness for the world. Amid all of this, a lot of people have been asking one crucial question. What happens to Trump's legal cases? Remember, he faces dozens of lawsuits across the US, some for financial fraud, some for sexual abuse, and also for trying to subvert the 2020 election. In one case, in New York, he was convicted. So what happens to these? Can Trump pardon himself for the New York case? Well, the answer is no. Presidents can only pardon federal crimes, and the New York case is a state lawsuit, so Trump cannot pardon himself. He is due to be sentenced on November 26th, but chances are it will be delayed. No judge will have the guts to drag a president-elect to the courthouse. And afterwards, what sort of punishment will Trump get? If it's jail time, he may be asked to serve it after he leaves office, which is in early 2029. If it's house arrest or community service, imagine the logistical issues. How can a president be confined to his house? The problem is there is no precedent for this. No convicted felon has ever been president of the US. So the New York judge faces a tough call. Beyond that, Trump also has federal cases. They are being investigated by the Department of Justice, a department that he will soon run. The man in charge of the probe is Jack Smith. Trump has promised to fire him within seconds of taking office. So Smith is doing the wise thing. He is winding down the investigation himself. But even that may not save his job. It tells you what's in store for the next 4 years. As president, Trump cannot be prosecuted, but he can be subjected to legal lawsuits. In fact, a lot of them are already pending. Trump has been asked to pay $570 million to different civil cases. He can use the might of the White House to delay that. Can he do that? Or maybe intimidate the defendants? America is in uncharted waters now, both legally and politically. Trump's own leadership and maturity will matter a lot in this time. Let's see how he tackles it. So Donald Trump is celebrating his win. He's speaking to leaders, he's spending time with family, and he's currently camping in Mar-a-Lago. That's his luxury resort in Florida. Meanwhile, his team is at work to prepare for the transition of power. Hectic meetings are underway. The first priority is to pick office bearers. That's candidates for the Trump cabinet. Several people are being vetted. And while this process is in focus only now, it began quite some time ago. That's right, the battle for these jobs began long before Election Day. So who are the top picks? Who are the people who will make up the cabinet for Trump 2.0? First, of course, is the Vice President. Now, we already know who that will be. J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate. Vance is 40 years old. He is the first millennial on a major party's presidential ticket, one of the youngest elected vice presidents in America. He will also be the first former Marine to hold this post. So a lot of firsts right there. J.D. Vance used to be a venture capitalist. In 2016, he wrote a memoir called Hillbilly Elegy. That's what shot him to fame. In 2017, he called Trump, and I'm quoting, a moral disaster. Clearly, he's changed his views since then. In 2022, he ran for the first time for political office, and now, 2 years later, he is the vice president-elect. Next up is Secretary of State, the person shaping America's foreign policy, especially with 2 wars underway. So it is a crucial post. And there are a few choices here. One of them is Rick Grenell, Trump's former ambassador to Germany. He has a tough stance on NATO, also on defense spending, which makes him one of Trump's top picks. There's also Bill Hagerty, Trump's former ambassador to Japan. He is known for his strong views on China. Also in the running is Marco Rubio, Florida senator and a Trump ally since 2016. Then there's the defense secretary, another important position. And there are a lot of contenders here too, but there's one name that is emerging stronger than the others, Mike Pompeo. He's already worked under Trump as CIA head and Secretary of State, so Pompeo could be back for a second stint. Fourth on the list is Treasury Secretary. Trump won because he pledged to fix the economy, so he needs someone who can do that. The top pick is Scott Bessent. He is a hedge fund investor, also an economic advisor to Trump. He supported his use of tariffs before. Another contender is Larry Kudlow, a prominent TV financial analyst. He was the director of Trump's National Economic Council. Fifth is the health secretary. Again, many names in the mix here, but only one stands out, and that is Robert F. Kennedy Jr. He abandoned his own presidential bid to endorse Trump. He wants to make America healthy again, and Trump seems to like that. He's promised to let Kennedy, and I'm quoting, go wild with health. But it's going to be difficult. Even Republicans are unlikely to confirm this appointment. So RFK Jr. may not get the job after all. We'll have to wait and see. But he could still influence health policies, maybe as a White House health czar. And finally, there's the chief of staff. During his last 4 years in the White House, Donald Trump had 4 chiefs of staff. That's a very high attrition rate for such a position. So he may want to avoid it this time, and that means picking loyalists like Susie Wiles, Trump's campaign manager, or Kevin McCarthy, the former U.S. House Speaker. Those are the important positions, but some other names are being floated too, like Indian origin Kash Patel. He's a Trump loyalist. In his previous cabinet, Patel was a national security official. Now he's being considered again, possibly for an intelligence role, like the CIA director or the director of national intelligence. And we also have Elon Musk, of course. He doesn't want a cabinet position. He wants an entire new department. It's called DOGE. That's Department of Government Efficiency, DOGE. The Tesla CEO wants to lead it to make the government run smoother. So those are some of Donald Trump's top picks. We don't know who he will choose eventually, but we know what his top criterion is, and that is loyalty. He talked about it on the Joe Rogan podcast. He said he regretted picking some people the last time. A lot of them abandoned him, so he wouldn't want to make the same mistakes. But while Trump may have his favorites, his party may not agree with all of them. You see, they were all behind him, united behind him during the campaign. But when it comes to running the government, there's a split. You have your traditional Republicans. They want a strong foreign policy, endless wars, and cutting down social spending. Then there's the populists, your J.D. Vance, Donald Trump's son, Don Jr., and even Tucker Carlson. They don't want the wars. They want to cut military aid. They want to boost industries. So that will be a battle going forward. We'll have to wait and see how it impacts the functioning of the Trump government. After he picks his team, Trump will get down to business. America is dealing with a host of problems. Chief among them are the economy and illegal immigration. Trump based his campaign on these issues. He promised to fix them, and that's why he was elected for a second term. So what will he tackle first? Where will he start? Let's go through what the first 100 days of his second term could look like, starting with day one.
We're going to turn it around. It's going to happen really fast, too. Two things. We're going to, first day, first hour, we can do many things in the first, but first, we're going to drill, baby, drill.
Drill, baby, drill was Trump's war cry throughout the election campaign. It was a solution to fix the economy, lower the energy prices, and bring drilling jobs back to the US. Trump says he will expedite drilling permits, clear any pending pipeline projects, and increase the sales of offshore drilling rights for oil and gas. It's a drastic departure from Joe Biden's green policies. But Trump is having none of that. His return means that a return to old-school fossil fuel exploitation in overdrive. And he says that he will enable all of this as soon as he takes office. Then comes the other big challenge, migration. Trump has day one plans for that too.
On November 5th, 2024, this will be Liberation Day in America. It's going to be Liberation. On day one, I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
Trump has a two-pronged approach to deal with the migration problem. First, getting rid of illegal immigrants who are already in the US with a massive deportation drive. Trump says that he will round up all undocumented migrants and kick them out. Can he really do that? Well, it is possible because Trump has an ace up his sleeve.
I'll invoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. Did you know that? I had to go back that far. We couldn't find anything because modern day politicians, even sort of old time, nobody had the courage of these original people.
Trump had to go very far back, but he found a law that could allow him to deport people. America's Alien Enemies Act from 1798. Trump and his advisors have done their homework and they think that this law will help them execute their deportation plan on day one. So that's the first prong of his plan to deal with illegal immigration. The second is making Mexico a buffer.
But now we have a new president in Mexico. Supposed a very nice woman, they say. I haven't met her. And I'm going to inform her on day one or sooner that if they don't stop this onslaught of criminals and drugs coming into our country, I'm going to immediately impose a 25% tariff on everything they send in to the United States of America.
Trump plans to fortify America's southern border to stop new illegal immigrants from getting in. He plans to bring back his Remain in Mexico program, forcing asylum seekers to wait in Mexico while their applications get processed. But for that, the Mexican government must cooperate. And here's how he will ensure that. Tighten the economic screws and keep raising tariffs until Mexico gives in. Trump has promised to do all of this on just day one. It is an ambitious agenda, but his team says they're ready. They're preparing a set of executive orders, presidential decrees that he can sign on day one in office to get the ball rolling. After this, his plans will get executed the old-fashioned way, via Congress. Trump's Republican Party has already flipped the U.S. Senate. They may retain control of the House of Representatives too. We're waiting for those results. If that happens, they get the trifecta. Control of both houses of Congress plus the presidency. The Republican Party will control all these three arms of government. Then nothing can stop Trump from passing the laws that he wants. If that happens, we can also expect tax cuts. Within days of Trump taking charge, Republican Congress leaders are reportedly circulating this letter. It shows that tax cuts are on top of the agenda. There will be other important issues to address too, but tax cuts, drilling and deportation are the focus of Trump's first 100 days in office. So that's the 100-day plan. But what about the time leading up to that? What do the next few weeks look like for Donald Trump? Well, there are two parts to it. The first is traditions. The president-elect has a lot of places to visit and a lot of hands to shake. The second part is the work, picking cabinet members and White House staff. So we decided to chart Donald Trump's next few weeks. Where is he now? When will he come to Washington? And what happens after that? Here's a report. This is home base for Donald Trump, his residence in Florida's Mar-a-Lago resort. This is where he plotted his comeback, where he hosted foreign dignitaries and where he watched his election triumph on Wednesday. A media contingent is camping across the shore. Patrol boats are also on alert. After all, this isn't just a former president's home. It's also the next president's home. Trump will not be here beyond January. He's got a busy couple of weeks ahead. First, a visit to the White House. Joe Biden has already extended an invite. It's only a question of when the visit happens. As per tradition, the incumbent president hosts the incoming leader at the White House. In 2020, Donald Trump skipped that tradition, but in 2016, he was hosted by Barack Obama to what turned out to be an awkward meeting. Expect animosity to hang in the air because Donald Trump will be hosted by two of his presidential rivals, Joe Biden, who defeated him in 2020, and Kamala Harris, whom he defeated this year. Away from Washington, the transfer of power begins. December 17th is the first step. State electors will meet in respective state capitals. These electors make up the Electoral College. For example, Texas has 40 Electoral College votes, meaning they have 40 state electors. All of them will cast their vote for the candidate who won that state. In this case, Donald Trump. This exercise happens in every state, after which these votes are transferred to Washington, D.C. It reaches here on the 25th of December. The next step happens right here at the US Capitol. The state electoral college votes are counted and certified by a joint session of Congress. The vice president conducts this proceeding and certifies the election. In this case, Trump's rival, Kamala Harris. This is usually a routine event in the transition of power, but this time it has been declared a national security event. Why? Because of what happened the last time when Trump supporters tried to overturn the certification process. Something tells us that won't be happening this time. After that, it's a countdown to inauguration. Trump will be quite busy on these days. He must pick political appointees, select cabinet members, receive daily presidential briefs, basically set up an entirely new administration. Chances are he will do that from Florida, from his Mar-a-Lago home.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President-elect of the United States, Donald John Trump.
Then, on January 20th, comes the big day. Trump's second inauguration. He will return to Washington, D.C. ahead of that. This is Blair House, the white building that you see behind me. This is the official presidential guest house, and it is tradition that the president-elect spends the night here before Inauguration Day. Joe Biden and his wife Jill did that on January 19th before his inauguration. And in 2017, Donald Trump also stayed at the Blair House before his inauguration. There was a lot of speculation that he might prefer a hotel, but he ended up staying here finally. Let's see if he sticks to that tradition this time. This is Trump's second time on this ride. Last time, he visited a church on Inauguration Day, after which he headed to the White House. The president and the president-elect ride together from there to the Capitol Hill. They will use the presidential limousine, the Beast, a car that Trump used just 4 years ago. And this is where the inauguration happens, on the west front of the US Capitol. The public can get free tickets from members of Congress. Usually inaugurations are attended by all former presidents and first ladies. The president-elect takes his oath of office on top of those stairs. Trump used 2 Bibles to take his oath the last time. One was his own, the other belonged to Abraham Lincoln.
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
After the inauguration, the new president sees off the outgoing leader. The Bidens will get one final ride on Air Force One. And the destination? Anywhere you pick. Once Biden leaves, it's the Trump show. He will first attend a luncheon at the US Capitol. There he will sign nominations and maybe even executive orders. After that, Trump will inspect military troops from the Capitol building. And then it's back to the White House. Ceremonial military regiments, citizens' groups, marching bands, all of them lead the President and the First Lady to the White House. They walk through Pennsylvania Avenue, often surrounded by hundreds of supporters who line the streets. All those traditions and steps bring us back here to the White House. Donald Trump will be back in the presidential limousine, the Beast. The motorcade will drive him from the US Capitol to the presidential mansion behind me. And thus another American presidency will begin. For Donald Trump, his second one. Trump spoke to a number of world leaders yesterday. Among the first was Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And there's a story here. US leaders often reach out to their allies first. Joe Biden did that in 2020. He took calls from Justin Trudeau of Canada, UK's former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he was Prime Minister then, Francis Macron, and the German Chancellor. These are America's most important allies. Biden spoke to Modi almost 10 days after winning the race. But look at Trump's call list on day one. It has Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. What does that tell you? What experts have always said. Trump is not a fan of the traditional Western alliance. He is keen to expand his Asian partnerships. In his call with Modi, Trump was all praise. He called India a magnificent country. He called Modi a magnificent man. And he promised to work for global peace. We know Trump is a great salesman, so don't fall for his pitch. Look at his policies instead. What does a Trump presidency mean for India? Foreign Minister Jaishankar was asked this question today. He listed out 4 possible impacts. Listen to this.
One, there was already a reordering of supply chains, which was taking place. Some of it would certainly be somewhat disruptive, but we in India perceive it as an opportunity. There will be, in a way, more geopolitical hedging. What accompanies the digital aspect of a product or a service or a technology, I think will come under greater scrutiny. Even a United States under Donald Trump will make a distinction in immigration and mobility, that for them economically justified mobility will have to be fostered.
We spoke about the rest of it yesterday. So let's turn our focus to India's neighborhood. How will Trump influence this region? Consider Pakistan first. In his first term, Trump openly called out Islamabad's double game. He accused them of harboring terrorists.
We can no longer be silent about Pakistan's safe havens for terrorist organizations, the Taliban, and other groups that pose a threat to the region and beyond. We have been paying Pakistan billions and billions of dollars. At the same time, they are housing the very terrorists that we are fighting. But that will have to change, and that will change immediately.
And this is exactly what India says, that Pakistan is supporting terrorism, and Trump followed up his criticism with actions. In 2018, remember, he cut off most military aid to Pakistan. He said, first crack down on terrorism, then we can talk aid. It triggered a lot of backlash in Pakistan. Trump's effigies were burnt in Pakistani cities, so the generals will not be happy about his comeback, especially after the recent reset. Under Joe Biden, Pakistan and the US had resumed military transfers. Biden also met Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in September. He was adding momentum to this relationship, but chances are Trump will hit the brakes. He's very clear about Pakistan's hypocrisy. Next, we come to Bangladesh. Trump has already fired a shot at the interim regime in Dhaka. Last week, he said that there was total chaos in Bangladesh, that Hindus and other minorities are being attacked and looted. So Donald Trump is no fan of Muhammad Yunus either. Again, very different from Joe Biden. The current US president hosted Yunus in New York. The Democrats absolutely love him. Barack Obama gave him a Medal of Freedom, and Bill Clinton hosted him at the Clinton Global Initiative. In fact, Yunus is very close to the Clintons. Will that affect US relations with Dhaka going forward? With the normal president, maybe not, but Trump is known to hold a grudge. Yunus has already sent congratulatory messages to Trump. He says he's looking forward to deepening ties, but chances are he will be a worried man, because he isn't the only Bangladeshi leader praising Trump. Guess who else is? Sheikh Hasina. She has released a congratulatory letter for Trump. And notice the first line of this letter. It says, Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Now remember, Hasina fled Dhaka in August this year. She's public enemy number 1 in the country right now, but she is still calling herself Prime Minister. Political wisdom says Trump will not respond to her. Nonetheless, let's see how it unfolds. While Yunus is worried, the Taliban is cautiously optimistic. They're calling for a new chapter in US-Afghanistan relations. They're hoping for quote-unquote realistic policies. And what would give them that impression? Well, nothing is off limits for Trump. He did strike a deal with the Taliban in 2020. That deal led to the US withdrawal from Afghanistan. He also held talks with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, that too thrice. So don't underestimate Trump's appetite for diplomacy. He may do it for the attention, but he will do it nonetheless. And what about other South Asian countries like Sri Lanka, Nepal and the Maldives? Biden was investing political capital in these countries in South Asia. The US hosted the Maldivian foreign minister in June this year. But Trump is unlikely to continue such engagement. His last presidency largely focused on India, Pakistan and Afghanistan. Yes, we did see occasional Trumpisms, like offering to mediate the Kashmir issue or mocking India for building a library in Afghanistan. But that's what you get with Trump. Few filters, fewer red lines. This election came down to domestic issues, none more important than cost of living. And that trend is global. Inflation has humbled a number of incumbents this year, whether it's in the Western world or in Africa or in Asia. It's been the ultimate deciding factor. Let's look at some of the elections we had in 2024, and we had a lot of them. More than 60 countries held elections this year. Around 50% of the world population voted. Now look at the results. In Britain, the ruling Conservative Party was ousted. The Labour is now in power. Around 45% voters said inflation was the biggest issue for them. In South Korea, we had parliamentary elections this year. President Yoon's party was wiped out. The Liberal opposition won a landslide. One of the biggest election issues was the price of green onions. In South Africa, the unthinkable happened. The ruling African National Congress lost its majority after 30 years, basically for the first time after apartheid. In France, same story. The right-wing parties won the European Parliament elections. The left-wing led the national elections. And who lost out both the times? President Macron's centrists. In Iran, we had presidential elections. Their hardline president was killed in a chopper crash. And who did the people replace him with? A reformist. And finally, you have Japan. The ruling party decided to call snap elections last month. They ended up losing more than 60 seats. Again, rice prices were a key issue. Of course, all these elections had a regional context too. But cost of living was common and a key issue. It cut across ideological lines. This factor did not spare left-wing leaders or right-wing leaders. It impacted all of them. Also, this trend is not limited to 2024. Argentina elected President Javier Milei in late 2023. The Maldives elected Mohamed Muizzu around the same time. Again, the issue was inflation. You can trace it back to the Wuhan virus pandemic. Most global supply chains were affected. Government spending skyrocketed. Welfare schemes were ramped up. All of this led to rising prices across the world. In 2022, global inflation was around 8% average. In 2019, it was just 2%. And the incumbents have been paying the price for this. In 2022, ruling parties and presidents were ousted in Brazil and Italy. Again, two major economies. The question is, how long will this impact last? Logic says until inflation reduces, but prices are often sticky. It takes time for changes to reflect on the ground. Consider the United States. In September, their inflation was just 2.4%. In mid-2022, it was more than 9%. And before the pandemic, just a shade above 2%. So we've come back to the same place. Prices have come down from the peaks of 2022. Even the labour market and GDP numbers are better than Europe. Yet, the incumbents lost. That too to a candidate who was voted out for mishandling a crisis. It tells you a couple of things. One, GDP growth and inflation graphs look good on TV channels, but people care about real life impact, about the numbers at petrol pumps and at the grocery store. They want to see if headline gains trickle down to them or not. And number two, voters will compromise on ideology, but not on livelihood. That's why the Democrats lost nearly 13 million voters from 2020. That's why Hispanics voted for Trump despite his rhetoric. It's a message to politicians around the world. Virtue signaling won't bring you the votes, nor will hate mongering. Voters care about concrete results that impact them directly. The question is this trend here to stay, or is it a temporary fallout of the pandemic? As they say, only time will tell. The year was 1980. Donald Trump was 34 years old. He was America's most flamboyant billionaire, and he described politics as a very mean life. Those were his words. He said that capable people choose business. But 7 years later, he entered politics. Over time, he's made 3 presidential bids, and now at 78 years of age, he has defied odds with a stunning political comeback. Well, that's Donald Trump for you, a businessman turned reality star turned president. Love him or hate him, you cannot ignore his persistence, his contradictions, and his fire. Our next report brings you Trump's story.
A twice impeached pariah, self-exiled in Florida, disgruntled over his 2020 defeat, silenced after the January 6th riots. This was Donald Trump in late January 2021. But by late February, the former president had had enough. So he made a public appearance at a right-wing conference in Orlando. It was his first as a newly private citizen of the United States. Trump took center stage, opened his arms wide and said, "Did you miss me yet?" Well, that's Trump for you. Love him or hate him, he's persistent, deliberate, delusional, and arguably charming. Now, less than 4 years later, Trump has pulled off an extraordinary reversal. Bulldozing those who doubted him, and a long winding journey led Trump to this moment. He was born in Queens, New York in 1946 to immigrant parents. His mother was a Scottish immigrant, and his father, the son of German immigrants, was a real estate tycoon. Trump joined the family business and became its president in 1971 and took it to new heights. Under Trump, the business shifted from residential projects in Brooklyn and Queens to swanky Manhattan projects, including the Trump Tower, which was his home for many years. Then came casinos, golf courses and hotels. Next on the radar for Trump was the entertainment world as the owner of several beauty pageants. He also sold everything from neckties to beverages, after which Trump went from being a businessman to a reality star. He hosted 14 seasons of the reality show The Apprentice. Soon, he was a household name. But by the late 1980s, he wanted more. In 1987, he registered as a Republican and teased a presidential bid. In 1999, he switched to the Reform Party. In 2001, the Democratic Party. In 2009, back to the Republican Party. But it wasn't until 2015 that Trump formally announced a bid for the White House. He flaunted his wealth, accused Mexico of sending drugs and rapists to the United States, promised to build a border wall, and trailed in opinion polls amid a controversy of a leaked audio tape of him bragging about sexual abuse.
You know, I'm automatically attracted to beautiful. I just start kissing them. It's like a magnet. You just kiss. I don't even wait. And when you're a star, they let you do it. You can do anything.
But ultimately, Trump had the last laugh. He was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States on January 20th, 2017. And from day one, Mr. President brought unrivaled drama to the job. He made formal announcements on X, clashed openly with world leaders, launched a trade war with China, banned travel from 7 Muslim-majority nations, issued tough immigration restrictions, implemented record tax cuts, and became the 3rd US president to be impeached. Then came the 2020 elections. They were dominated by the pandemic.
The virus. They're working hard. Looks like by April, in theory, when it gets a little warmer, it miraculously goes away.
Trump lost the race to Biden by more than 7 million votes, but he refused to accept the results.
If you count the legal votes, I easily win. If you count the illegal votes, they can try to steal the election from us.
This eventually devolved into the Capitol riots, criminal cases, and a historic second impeachment, with the metaphorical Trump Tower crumbling in what seemed like a political game of Jenga. Trump's political career appeared as good as dead. But Trump was not done with politics just yet. He entered the 2024 presidential race facing 91 felony charges across 4 criminal cases. he witnessed 2 assassination attempts. He made claims which should have been career suicide.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats.
And yet, Donald Trump, the walking, talking contradiction, the businessman turned reality star turned felon, is once again the President of the United States.
Our next story is about containment. How does one stop a Donald Trump? Stop Trump from doing whatever he likes and steamrolling over anything he doesn't? This question is extremely important for Europe right now, especially members of NATO. They have 2 major fears. 1, Trump may destroy the alliance, and 2, that he will stop backing NATO's current project, the defense of Ukraine. Let's start with NATO's existential threat. NATO stands for North Atlantic Treaty Organization. It's a defensive alliance with 32 members, the US and Canada on one side of the Atlantic Ocean and 30 European nations on the other side, hence the name North Atlantic Treaty Organization. NATO promises to protect every member. An attack on one member is seen as an attack on all. That's the concept. It's supposed to be reassuring, but perhaps it was too reassuring for Europe. For decades, they took the foot off the gas. They allowed the US to act as their protector. They relied on Big Brother America when it came to any defensive needs. And it may have continued had it not been for Trump. Trump believes that Europe is taking the US for a ride. He thinks they aren't contributing enough to NATO, not paying their fair share. Trump had pointed this out throughout his first term, and in February, he made a threat. He said he may allow Russia to invade, and I'm quoting, delinquent NATO countries, nations who did not contribute 2% of their GDP to defense. This threat sent shockwaves through Europe, and objectively, it did work. European NATO members decided to Trump-proof the alliance by just doing as he asked, by increasing their spending. Look at this graph. Up until last year, only 10 NATO members reached the 2% threshold. They spent 2% of their GDP on defense. This year, that number is up to 23 countries. The number of NATO members paying their fair share has more than doubled. This includes both France and Germany. It's something they've been keen to highlight.
But finally, which is nevertheless also to participate in an overall strengthening of the alliance, in particular by fulfilling the contribution objectives and the famous 2% of the gross domestic product.
And that's why I would like to emphasize once again that the discussion about the 2% is one thing. We all know that, in case of doubt, the 2% can only be the lower limit in the long term.
Both France and Germany were talking about NATO contributions yesterday, saying that even 2% was just the beginning. Talk about a complete U-turn. Both France and Germany seem to have secured their place in the NATO and maybe in Trump's good graces. But they're still worried. All of Europe is. And France wants to use this as an opportunity. President Emmanuel Macron wants to wean Europe away from the US.
There has been a strategic awakening among us Europeans, and we must embrace it. We cannot delegate our security to the Americans forever.
That is another form of Trump-proofing, reducing their reliance on the United States. European leaders have gathered in Brussels today to decide how to go forward with this. So that is how NATO is dealing with its existential problems. But what about Ukraine? NATO has been backing Ukraine against Russia for over 2.5 years now. They have put all their eggs in President Volodymyr Zelensky's basket. But Donald Trump doesn't think that way. He doesn't blame only Russia for the war. He blames Zelensky too. Trump has promised to end the war in Ukraine, and reports say that he could ask Ukraine to give up some of its territory to Russia. So how does NATO plan to deal with this? How does Joe Biden plan to deal with this? Well, both camps have been taking steps to Trump-proof their war effort. Earlier this year, NATO took over some responsibilities from the United States. They set up a command center in Germany to coordinate aid supplies and training for Ukraine. By handing over this duty to NATO, the Biden administration partially Trump-proofed it. And that isn't all. Biden has been trying to expedite shipments of aid, the money already promised and allotted to Ukraine. He wants all the aid sent by the end of this year, and the logic again is simple: spend all the money fast before Trump takes the wallet back. But they can't really do much else. New aid commitments won't be possible. Trump could just cancel them the minute he takes over. So there's a limit to Trump-proofing the Ukraine war. And that's bad news for Zelensky. But it may be good news for American taxpayers. We told you about the Trump camp. Now let's look at the other side, the Democrats. They lost the White House, they lost the Senate, and they are on track to lose the Congress too. In simple words, it's a dumpster fire, and the Democrats don't know how to extinguish it because they are busy pointing fingers. Some blame Kamala Harris, some hold Joe Biden responsible, and a few slam the party's image altogether. But what exactly was the problem? How did the Democrats go so wrong? Our next report examines.
It's time for a postmortem. 3 months ago, it looked like the Democrats had it all. A new young candidate, an energized support base, millions of dollars in donations, a string of high-profile endorsements. It's like they could do nothing wrong. Yet, they did do everything wrong. They lost the presidency, they lost the Senate, they may lose the House too. So it's really a turn of fortune for the Democrats, and the blame game has begun. Some of them are pointing fingers at Kamala Harris. After all, she was leading the charge. She began her campaign over 100 days ahead of the election. It was supposed to be a new guard. Yet it was the same old wine in a new bottle. Harris failed to shed her Biden baggage. Her dilemma was obvious. This was a man who selected her. How could she abandon him and slam his policies? But that did not go down well. American citizens wanted more, yet what they got was an extension of the same. Plus, Harris made most of her campaign about Trump. She highlighted what he would do to damage America. But she didn't highlight how she would make it better. And while she was loyal to Biden, the Democrats don't feel so good about the president right now. He may have delivered them a win in 2020, but many believe he lost them the election this year. His administration was highly unpopular. He stayed in the race till very late. And when he did leave, he chose his vice president. No incumbent party has ever won with a president with a 40% approval rating. So the odds were stacked against the Democrats. If Biden had stepped down earlier, they could have had a primary. Candidates would have been able to prove their might. And they would have had a battle-tested candidate, not Kamala Harris, who previously had a lackluster run in the Democratic primaries. But beyond blaming Harris or even Biden, there's a bigger problem for the Democrats. An image problem. Bernie Sanders pointed it out. The Vermont senator had released a scathing statement. It slams the party and its campaign, but one particular line stands out. As they say, it's the economy, stupid. It seems the Democrats forgot about it. They focused on everything from abortion to the threat to democracy to attacking Donald Trump and quoting celebrity endorsements. Yet they seem to forget a basic cliché. None of that matters when food and gas prices are soaring, when the cost of living is rising every day. So clearly, the Democrats have some soul searching to do. For years, they've